Got it.
We are all set to go.
Awesome. So let's do our opening meditation. So just find a comfortable seat. We'll just do a couple breaths. You can take the palms face up on the lap. And have the eyes drift closed. Just slow down your breathing and just notice what's going on behind what's going on for you this Saturday morning or whatever time it is. Just take a moment to draw the senses inward. Let the breath slow, let the chest lift. And as you slowly gather your awareness inside, just come back to this idea of trust and knowing in your heart center that you can do this, that this material is going to challenge you, especially at the beginning, but that we're here together and that by showing up on this call, you're taking a big step towards what I think is going to be a really rewarding journey for you. So just breathe into this trust and knowing in your heart space today. Big in, big out. Twice more like that. Inviting in a full, rich inhale. Making an exhale that's an equal length. And final time in. Really feel the rib cage expand in every direction. And exhale completely. Good. Bring the hands to prayer at heart center, Anjali Mudra. Dip the chin. Just take one final breath here, just to be grateful for yourself, for showing up, for the fun material we have to cover today. And then as you're ready, slowly blink your eyes open and come back to our digital space. And you can take any stretches you need if you want to stretch. I've started stretching like this all the time, and it's so funny because Alex, my little toddler, copies me. He goes, oh, it's so cute. So I wanted to touch on that in the meditation and just talk to all of you because I was reading the Facebook group last night and I saw a really great post from Jamie who expressed just feeling nervous and anxious, and it was really great because that thread sort of blew up in the Facebook group and so many of you were able to relate to what she said and what she was going through. And I just wanted to remind all of you that it's so normal to feel nervous or anxious anytime you're embarking on something new, but especially at this point in the training because you're having so much information thrown at you, especially anatomical information, which many of us aren't familiar with, the planes of movement, the names of the bones. I mean, I think this is a lot of the hardest material and it's all up front, but it has to be that way because we need to understand anatomy to then look at all the postures and then go within and explore the subtle body. And so it's this way by design, but I remember when I did my very first teacher training feeling so overwhelmed by especially the anatomical concepts. So just know that any anxiety you're feeling, or if you're feeling this is over your head, that's normal. It's totally normal. It would be abnormal if you didn't feel that way. And that all the teachers who've walked this path before you, myself included, whether they trained online or in person, they all felt this way too. So it's really important, I think, to connect to that. This is not easy. Again, especially the anatomical material. It was hard for me at the beginning as well. So again, just come back to that visual of the sponge. I think Stephanie put this in the Facebook group too. And if you can't trust yourself to be the sponge and know that what you need is going to come and you're going to end this training with so much knowledge that you didn't even know you were picking up along the way. If you can't trust yourself, trust me, All right. Trust me, because I've been doing this a long time now. And you have hundreds of successful graduates who've walked this path ahead of you. So you can also like energetically connect to them. They were all in your shoes. And I'm sure, I know, I'm not, I'm sure, I know that they felt overwhelmed, and just know that you're doing a great job. It's a lot of material, and just do the best you can. And if there's pieces you're not understanding along the way, that's okay, right? That's also the beauty of this course. You can come back and watch and review these videos over and over and over again, if not now, a year from now. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly, because anxiety is real, and it's actually why most of us are drawn to yoga. So know that, myself included, right? That was like my impetus for finding this practice. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on that. And I know this is our first Saturday live call. So it's important that if this is your first live call, you know where the chat box is. So maybe everyone can put their favorite yoga pose in the chat right now, so we can just test out the chat box and make sure you guys know how to use it. I see Freddie, Melissa, Mary, Katrin. Okay, awesome. So if you don't know where the chat box is, unmute so we can help you, or, it's really important, because it's just how you're going to chat with everyone throughout. And then the next thing that's really important to know is how to mute and unmute. Again, if you already were on a previous call and you know how to do that, awesome. But if this is your first call, which I know it is for the Saturday class, take a moment now. It'll be loud and weird, but it's okay. Just make sure you can see where to mute and unmute. So you can even unmute yourself and then mute yourself again and do a little test. And it's okay if you want to shout something out at me, like namaste, or namaste. I don't know. Yeah, so I hear the muting and unmuting. And then the hardest one is raising your hand. Making sure you know how to raise your hand and lower your hand. So see if you can find that now too. Awesome. So Lisa just raised her hand. Alana did. Bridget, Kristen. Great. Perfect. So if you don't, again, look throughout the call, and you can also ask people in the chat. Yeah, Lisa, you guys got it. So cool. So now lower your hand, everyone, and let's dive into the material for today. All right. So we're talking about B.1.3 today, and I was hoping one of our student teachers would maybe be willing to talk us through the definition of tapas. So does one of our student teachers want to unmute and tell us about tapas? Or there's the definition?
I don't know how to raise my hand, but I can talk.
Awesome.
I can unmute.
Where are you from?
From Houston, outside of Houston, Texas.
Oh. Hello, hello.
Hi. Okay, in all that excitement, I forgot what you asked. So
we're tapas, the definition of tapas, or what you wrote.
I loved this. So I wrote, it's the focus of my attention, and I loved the light bulb versus the laser. It's magnified by focusing, and it has such a different effect. I love that.
Yes, that's awesome. So exactly like Ricky said, thank you so much. Yes, it's like motivated, focused energy. And I love that. Laser is compared to a light bulb. So it's really this single pointed focus. And it can be applied to anything, right? So on the mat, but also in our life. And a lot of times tapas gets translated, I think, in yoga world as just like heat or hard work. Put yes in the chat if you've ever heard that definition, right? That like tapas is heat, or like kind of like sweat. And it does mean that, but in a much broader sense, it's like it's heat in the sense of transformation. It's the burning of working through something that challenges us. So when we broaden it to, because sometimes it is literally defined as heat, not like just heat, like heating yoga, but like tapas, like your work could be to do a yin class if you're a really type A type of person, right? That could be take a lot of motivated, focused energy for you and actually be where the transformation is. So again, when we look at these Sanskrit words, there's not a one-to-one correlation. A lot of them mean multiple things. But when you think of tapas, I want you to think about like that energy, that single pointed, motivated, focused energy that's moving you towards transformation. I think, right? If it has that transformative connotation attached to it, or I like to think of it that way. And in that way, like tapas is different for everyone, right? For Ricky, it might be look like, meditating, like that's where her challenge is. For someone else, it might look like doing an Ashtanga class. For someone else, it might look like learning how to sit still. So it's also this idea of, I think, accepting that challenges make us stronger, right? What's hard for us, what's challenging for us, guess what? Usually that's the direction we need to head in. So a concept here is that like painful experiences or things that feel uncomfortable, like maybe starting this training, it feels uncomfortable. You're in a moment of discomfort because there's new ideas and things feel scary. But those experiences are what is used for growth and for spiritual growth. And this is a theme in every world religion, right? There's pain and suffering of some sort, and then there's growth, there's enlightenment. So let's pull it back or pull it in a little bit more towards the physical yoga practice. What poses did people write down that generated a sense of tapas for them? Maybe we can hear some in the chat. Camel. Oh, interesting. Down dog, warrior poses, upward salute, chaturanga, chair. That's mine. Same as Matthew, chair. When I'm in chair, I'm like, ooh, tapas. I'm feeling it because it's challenging for me and I just want to do fun, feel good things all the time. So my work, my tapas is to, try to do more strengthening. Dancer. Okay, awesome. Very cool. Plank. Yeah. So it's going to be different, a little different for everyone. So let's talk now about this Ishvara Pranidhana, because this is, I think this can be challenging for some folks. So does a different student teacher want to talk to us about the answer they had for this one, or the definition that they kind of are working with? What does this mean? You can just unmute.
Hi guys.
Hi.
My name's Alana. Just intro.
Where are you from?
I'm from Riverside, California.
Okay, California. Nice.
So what I had for this was to surrender your need to control. So basically just to relax.
I love that definition. Yes. Yeah. So surrender what you think should happen, or your need to control. I love how you said it. That's beautiful. I also love your sweater. So yeah. So it's like letting go. And I think it's a lot of times in contact with tapas. That's why they go so nicely together, because it's like you put in your effort, you put in your hard work, but then at the end you sort of let go of the fruits of your labor and you say, you know what, I've tried really hard, I've done the best I could, but I'm open to any outcome. I'm ultimately open to any outcome. And that's another thing that could maybe help some of you that are feeling anxious with the training, right? You're like, am I going to graduate? Is it going to work out? Am I going to be a good teacher? And you can kind of let go of that and say, well, I'm going to put in my effort and my single pointed focus and do the best I can in this training. And I'm going to release whatever expectations I have right now, right? Maybe I'll graduate, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll go on to teach forever. Maybe this is just a personal journey for me right now, right? So that's where you can invite in this surrendering of your need to control, but it's also about this kind of like offering up your labor to something greater than yourself and believing in something bigger than yourself. And sometimes this word is triggering for people because it gets translated in some texts by some Sanskrit scholars as meaning God, right? But I'm going to encourage us to work with this definition of like exactly like Alana said, surrendering control, surrendering, trying to control the outcome, releasing that fist of trying to control how everything goes. Awesome, thank you. So Svadhyaya we kind of talked about on an earlier call. Does a student teacher, anyone want to unmute and tell us a little bit about this word? Or I can talk to this one.
Okay,
Or oh, I heard someone unmute. Yes. Alana, yeah.
Yeah. So for Svadhyaya, I got the study of yourself.
Yes, I love that. So this is a really big word that we talked about on the first call, and I'm going to keep coming back to. So this means reading and studying, but it also means introspection, like she said. So what's cool about this sutra too is that this self-study ultimately is about us observing within ourselves the interplay of these two dynamics of tapas and ishvara pradidhana. Put yes in the chat if you get that or you like that. Right? That's the self-study. As we get to know ourselves more, we can start to figure out, okay, where do I need to put in more effort? Where do I need to release the fist of control? Where do I need to surrender a little bit more, but still move forward and be highly motivated, right? So the more we kind of figure out this interplay and how it works within us, the more we can trust our own direct experience. So for me, Svadhyaya is not about being like studying books and then being like a blind follower to those texts or books. That's not what it's about at all. It is about learning and studying text, but it's also about us getting to know and trust ourselves more and more, this introspection. And I think it's also about mastery of concepts at a deep level, right? So it's easy to just like skim books and, you know, browse a bunch of stuff and regurgitate information and not really be sure. What I want to encourage us all in this training to do is to really go deep with the material. So instead of breadth, depth, and then that's over time how you're going to really start to trust your own direct experience by mastering one meditation, for example, and getting really deep with it and feeling really confident, and then teaching it and feeling so confident in it because you've experienced it yourself so much. Okay, so let's talk about B.1.4, and does someone want to recap sthira and sukha for us? And I saw in the Facebook group some people were saying, well, these principles are similar, and they are similar in some ways, but they also mean quite different things. So let's review. Who wants to talk about sthira and sukha? Student teacher or someone else?
I can talk about it. This is Danielle.
Hey, Danielle.
Hi. I'm actually in your neighborhood, Brett.
Oh, very cool.
East side. Yeah. So let's see. I have Suk, which is the center of the wheel. So it's like where, like it's the strongest point of the wheel, and it's also where the wheel is most balanced, is what I put. And sthira is, where did I have that? It's kind of the two together is like finding this sweet and steady seat. So like finding the sweet spot and finding where the ease is in the work.
Yes. So awesome. And I'm excited you're my neighbor. That's cool. So yeah, so sthira is structure. That's how I like to think of sthira. Structure, boundaries, steadiness. Okay. Sukha is sweetness, like literally, but also like openness, expansion. And Kristen talks a lot about it as good space, right? Having good space. So your knee joint not being all compressed, but having good space in the joints, right? We're going to talk about that later. So this is different than tapas and ishvara pranidhana, like someone was asking in the group. It's similar in the sense that we're talking about like two ends of the spectrum. But with tapas and ishvara pradidhana, it's almost like we're talking more philosophically, and we're talking about effort and then surrendering the fruits of our effort to something greater than ourselves. With sthira and sukha, we're talking literally about structure and space, and we need both structure and space in everything in life, but especially, as we're going to see, in the asana practice, right? So for example, in our rib cage, we have structure to protect the heart. We have our bones, but there also needs to be space so that we can breathe and so the diaphragm can move, right? And then the body's so amazing. We have like true ribs and false ribs and floating ribs. And then our ribs are made up of bone that transforms into cartilage before attaching to the breastbone. Isn't that so cool? So our body is like creating the structure, but it's also creating space, right? And this is what allows us to breathe. In our approach to the yoga practice, sthira and sukha become relevant. So not just anatomically. Think about in the yoga postures themselves, right? We need to draw our core in. That would be more tapas. We need to effort, and also then breathe. But let me use a better example. So in our approach to the practice, you could think about your sthira, right, is being really focused on your alignment, right? So having your perfect side angle, your knees directly over your ankle, you're in the right structure. But if you're in that right structure and you're all rigid and your shoulders up by your ear, maybe your face is scrunched up, right? You're missing the sukha. You're missing the openness and the expansion in the posture, which would look like focusing on your breath, which would look like relaxing that top shoulder, which would look like maybe spiraling the chest towards the ceiling, right? But if we just did that all loosey-goosey and we weren't really in side angle pose, then we're kind of too much in the sukha direction, yeah? So we need both. That's how these asanas work best, is when we have both the structure and boundary, but we still have this sense of sweetness and openness, which could also be described as like the pose feels good, right? The pose feels good. You can still breathe. Your students can still take a deep breath, yeah? So it's about balancing these two polarities, yeah? And again, the principles of this can come off the mat as well, right? Do you need more structure in your life, or do you need more sweetness, openness, expansion in your life, right? So are you like living on a military schedule and really hard on yourself, or are you not hard enough on yourself, right? These concepts are like so broad, and that's why I think it's so fun to study them. Let's talk a little bit about two other words that I think are going to come up a lot, as I want you to think about as you start looking at students, is this idea of the stiffies and the flexies. So I think Kristen touches on this in the video, but I want to recap it here because this is so important. So as a teacher, you want to start thinking and scanning your room and sort of figuring out which students are your stiffies and which students are your flexies. Pretty much everyone falls into these two categories now. Is it nice to categorize people? No, but this is actually a teaching tool. So it is quite effective, and it's really going to change the way you think about your own practice as well. So the stiffies are people who I always like, again, we're going to stereotype just for the sake of learning. Your stiffies are like, I visualize like the bodybuilder that comes into your class, right? He has a lot of muscles and he's not very flexible. And it could be a her too, right? I'm just trying to paint a visual picture to help you guys understand the concept. So our stiffies are incredibly strong. In the strength aspect, they're excelling, which is awesome. But in the range of motion and flexibility aspect, they're struggling. Okay, then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you're going to have the people who walk into your class who are the ex-dancers, people who have hypermobility in their joints. We're going to talk about that later in training. People who are just really, really flexible. I find it's usually women, right? These are your flexies who are coming into your class. They're really, really flexible. So they can do back bends and the wild things, and they're just all tons of range of motion, but they don't have a lot of potentially strength that like the stiffies have. So what's interesting about yoga, because yoga gets this rep that like yoga is just about flexibility, but what we're going to see through this training and as we step into the role of the teacher, is actually not about that. It's about the equal balance of strength and flexibility. You're trying to help all your students meet in the middle. You're trying to help your stiffies gain flexibility and range of motion. You're trying to rein your flexies in and get them to focus more on boundaries and structure and strength so that everyone can stay safe in the middle. How does this feel to folks? Or what do people think about this? And do you identify as a stiffy or a flexi, or has this changed the way you think about your practice? So Erica says, flexi, need to work on strength so I don't hurt myself. Yes. So, and who, statistically, again, it's hard to, but which do you think gets injured more? Stiffies or flexies? On average. So Lisa says stiffy, Amber says flexi, Katrin says flexi, Ashley says flexi, Monica, yes, the flexies. The flexies actually are at greater risk for injury because it's so easy for them to push themselves too far. And they're probably scanning Instagram and they think more is better, more is better. So if I can, do a normal back bend, I should be doing the back bend where I also am holding my ankles and have my forearms on the floor. And if I can do that, I should, then I don't know, get a yoga wheel and do it on a yoga wheel and make it even, right? So it's, and eventually they push too far and we see herniated discs, we see all sorts of injuries. So that's something to be aware of. Flexies, I also like to call them, and I'm a flexie 100%, right? So guilty as charged. Flexies also, I like to call them sensation junkies. Can anyone relate to that? They're like, oh, this feels so good. Like in every posture, like they're all about the sensation. And again, they want to go into max range of motion at all times. Now we want healthy range of motion, but again, you're going to see with your flexies, they're chasing sensation when really you need to encourage them to focus on strength, right? They need to focus on core strength. They need to focus on reining it in. They need to focus on knitting the ribs together. They need to create that stita really for themselves. Okay. So start right now. I don't know how many of you are going to yoga classes out in studios, but start already trying to identify folks, and having this knowledge about yourself is, I think, really great. Okay, so B.1.5, let's talk about the definition of vinyasa, because this is a really important word. So student, teacher, or someone else want to just unmute, no need to raise your hand, just unmute and tell us a little bit about this word vinyasa. What are some of the definitions of this word?
Vinyasa means to place your attention in a specialized way.
Thank you, Amber. Yes. Where are you from?
I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, yay, California. I miss LA and California. I was browsing stuff online for like some different and it's just like everything is in Los Angeles and New York. Like any service you want, any business. So that's awesome. Welcome. Yeah, so to place your focus in a specific way, that's the definition that Kristen gives in the video. And I now want to offer you guys another definition, because you're going to see throughout the training, Kristen and I agree on a lot, but sometimes we don't agree on everything. And I think it's also just fun to get different perspectives on things. So I love Kristen's definition. I think it's great. Another definition that I want to throw at you guys to see if you like it is this definition of vinyasa as linking breath and movement. Linking breath and movement in any capacity. So that could be as simple as inhale your arms up, exhale, draw your hands down through heart center. Inhale, arms up, exhale arms. So that's a vinyasa, right? There's then the more traditional, what we call vinyasa, the Surya Namaskar A, right? Inhale, arms up. Exhale, fold forward. So in all of yoga, or in vinyasa style yoga, we're linking breath and movement. So to me, that is an important definition that we can add on to vinyasa. In hatha yoga, for example, we're not always linking breath and movement in quite the same way. We might hold a posture for a couple breaths and stay there. That's great too. But this idea of vinyasa for me is very much about linking breath and movement, right? Inhale, come on up, warrior two. Exhale, hold here. Inhale, side angle pose. Exhale, reverse warrior. It's this idea of often one breath per movement, although it doesn't have to always be that way. So I just like that definition, linking breath and movement as another way you can think about vinyasa. All right, what are some of the components of the yoga practice or yoga sequence that Kristen talked to us about being anatomically dubious? So let's review these, because this is really important. What did Kristen talk about as being anatomically dubious? Student, teacher, or anyone, talk to us about this, because this is important.
I like she said, you have to be really careful about putting too many poses all on the same side, because it can cause imbalance. And that's something I struggle with, and I had an aha moment when she was talking about that.
Cool. Yeah. Does anyone remember, thanks Danielle, does anyone remember the word in the chat that it causes imbalance, but it's the exact thing that we're worried about anatomically in the body? Sacroiliac destabilization. No one put it in the chat, but sacroiliac destabilization. So we're going to talk a lot more about that later. So just kind of put that word in your back pocket for right now. But yeah, too many postures on one side can be destabilizing for folks. However, again, this is a place where I want to add on to what Kristen said, right? However, some people need the sequence to be entertaining in order to stay engaged, right? So if you're doing chaturanga and fancy sequencing when it's not necessary, for example, if you're teaching beginners or you're teaching it because you think you need to prove that you're a cool teacher or something like that, those are all things to look at. But again, we always want to look at who you're teaching and where you're teaching and what are the expectations. Because I know from teaching myself, I used to teach at some studios where having sort of fancy postures and or fancy sequences, right, with a lot of postures on one side and a lot of that was an expectation. That was just how that studio functioned, and that's what people coming into the studio expected. They were expecting a really fancy, fun sequence, and they were expecting music. So you need to be aware of that, right? So there's a difference between kind of matching the environment that you're teaching in. Now, if I were still teaching that fancy sequence with a bunch of poses on each side, like to a private client or to a beginner, right, that's where it begins to not make sense. But remember, some people need a little bit of a fancier sequence. And a fancier sequence doesn't always mean a lot of postures on one side and a lot of postures on the other side, but sometimes it does. Some people need that to stay engaged. So another thing we're going to keep talking about throughout training is like meeting your students where they are, meeting them where they are. So if you're teaching at a gym, like a power yoga flow where people are expecting it almost to be like a dance class or entertaining with a lot of postures and a lot of movement and music, you need to meet them where they are, right? That's how they're, if you just came to that class and we're like, we're all going to do super slow flow hatha yoga and we're going to hold triangle pose just on each side for like 20 breaths each, right? Like they wouldn't be able to get there. They wouldn't be able to relate. They're not ready yet, right? And it's not like one is better than the other. So remember, you want to allow for your teaching to meet people where they are. Okay. How's that landing for folks? Now, and I completely agree with what Kristen said. If we have too many postures on one side for no reason, right? Like it's just to show off our sequencing skills or, it's not really in service of our student, then that doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's really good to be aware of this because even if you do want to create fancier sequences, we're going to show you how to safely do that. So this, especially this sacroiliac destabilization issue, isn't going to be such an issue. You can sequence in a way where you can kind of avoid that or make it much less risky for your students. And we're going to show you exactly how to do that. But it's tricky, says Katrin. Yeah, you want to teach what you enjoy, but you need to serve the student in front of you, right? So remember, it's always about the student and meeting their needs. Some students need Shakira playing to get to a place of yoga, right? How many of us entered this journey through Bikram yoga? Some of us need to be like in a sauna, barely able to breathe and sweating our guts out in order to first get in touch with like that bliss of Shavasana, in order to first connect with yoga, right? That was me. I needed Bikram for like 2 years, right? And then it gets the ball rolling and then it changes, right? So this is what we need to remember as about our students, is that they're in that journey too, right? So we need to meet them where they are. So it's not like we can be like, oh, well, playing music is bad, or Bikram is bad, or heated yoga is bad, or power yoga isn't, the true deep yoga that we all enjoy, like that. No, right? It's all good. It's all good. We got to meet our students where they are. Okay. So sorry, that was a little bit of a sidetrack, but I really like to talk about that. What else did Kristen talk about as anatomically dubious? I saw someone put inversions in the chat. So does someone want to unmute or just talk a little bit about why are inversions a little dubious for us?
I can speak to that.
Yay!
Someone who used to chase the headstand.
Oh yes.
Tomorrow. We're not meant to walk on our heads. We're not meant to stand on our heads. That's why we have legs.
Yes.
And that resonated with me. It was like okay, don't have to chase after that anymore.
Yes, on our hands or our head. And do you guys remember, or maybe it's coming up, but we're going to see with Kristen the cervical vertebra compared to the lumbar vertebra. I think this is a little bit getting into next call's material. But when we see that, you're going to really see, if you haven't watched that video yet, that our lumbar vertebra is really designed to support our full body weight. Our cervical vertebra, not so much. So we'll be talking about that a lot more. A big epiphany for me, and I do think I chased, well, again, everything in moderation, and nothing's bad, right? But a big aha moment for me once I really started understanding the spine, and again, like seeing the, come on, little friend, seeing the vertebra in the spine and how it's so different section by section. And also my understanding my wrists, and especially like my mom is getting arthritis, and also like bringing all this together, I realized that I can get all the benefits of inversions without putting pressure on my hands or neck or my cervical spine. What does that look like? It looks like inversion table. It looks like my yoga trapeze, right? There's so many postures that are inversions, like legs up the wall, or even doing a wide-legged forward fold, right? That give us the benefits of inversions, which we're going to cover in detail later in the training, without the risk of injuring our head and neck. Okay, so, and Bridget just completed the yoga trapeze training with my friend Lucas. I'm assuming she did it with my friend Lucas. That's awesome. I'm curious to hear how that went. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it in the Facebook group, Bridget. Okay, so yes, and Glenda says tendonitis in her wrist from gymnasts and stuff. Yeah. So again, these are just things to be aware of. What else did Kristen talk about in that video? A little bit like, what else is dubious in our practice? Did someone put in the chat, or did we talk about too many vinyasa flows, too many chaturangas? So real quick on this, like the chaturanga vinyasa flow, meaning like down dog, plank, chaturanga, up dog, down dog, that little sequence, it's sort of become the de facto way to build heat in a yoga class. What percentage of people in a yoga class do you think are doing chaturanga safely and anatomically correct? Bridget says 5. Yes. Yeah. I'd say like 2 to 5%. Yeah. So when we're asking then people to do that over and over and over and over again, we're risking repetitive stress injury. We're risking wear and tear, honestly, just on the muscles. I mean, for me, even if you can do it correctly, so let's talk about that, like 2 to 5% that probably are, they have perfect alignment in their vinyasa flow, so very small percentage. Even those that can achieve that, like I can achieve that now, I can only do it like 5 times. And then I'm exhausted. Then I'm so tired because it's so hard to do that then I start doing it wrong because my body's tired. So we're going to look at each of these poses in detail, but I think people underestimate how hard that chaturanga flow is, how hard it is to do that push-up. So the great news is that it's really unfortunate, I think, that these vinyasa flows has become the, sort of the de facto way to build heat in a class, because it really isn't in service of your students, because you're asking them to do something that's so challenging that they're likely doing wrong, you know, in quotes, in ways that we're anatomically worried about their safety. That's what I mean by that when I say wrong. We're worried about their safety. It's not something that's like bringing them into homeostasis or balancing or helping them gain strength or flexibility in a safe way. It's something that's dangerous and risky. We're asking them to do that over and over and over again. The reason most teachers do this and most trainings pump out teachers that teach this way, I think, is just because it's like the easiest way to teach, right? Because if you just ask people to do a ton of chaturangas, which is essentially like a ton of push-ups, your class is going to get warm, right? They're going to warm up the body. But what we're going to do in this training instead, which is way harder, is we're going to teach you how to cue really effectively so that people build heat without having to do a million push-ups. Most students don't know how to properly engage the body to make it work. Like, so to turn their muscles on. So the example I always give here is like a ballerina. Have you ever seen a ballerina? She does like, even if she's a professional dancer, she does 5 plies in first position and she's sweating immediately. Why? Because she knows how to work her body. She's resisting as she bends her knee. She's resisting as she comes up. She has her whole body engaged. So she just does 3 plies and she breaks a sweat. Right? Most people don't know how to engage their body that way. So instead we ask them to do like all these push-ups and all these exercises to try to get them warm. But we don't need to do that. You can teach your students how to engage the body just like the ballerina with really effective cueing, which we're going to cover in this training, so that you can have them do 1 or 2 chaturangas or do some lunges or hold some planks or do other things that's actually going to get them super warm and heated. Okay? So hopefully we're excited about that. And then I think Kristen also talked about, we've also covered this, like more isn't always better, right? We talked about that with the flexies. We want a healthy range of flexibility for our students. It's not always like more, right? So that's changed for me over the years. My goal every time I did wide-legged forward fold, like my goal was always to get my chest on the floor. Like it wasn't a day, it wasn't a class unless I got my chest on the floor. Now, I'm just more focused on not pulling anything. I'm more focused on keeping my legs strong, my pelvic floor engaged, and tipping forward just 45 degrees or so. That's a healthy range of balance for me, actually. Healthy range of flexibility for me. So B.1.6 is about the bones. So you don't need to memorize all the bones, but it's, I think, good to know what bones are part of the axial skeleton and which are part of the appendicular skeleton. So this really confused me when I was in training many years ago. The clavicle, which is the fancy word for collarbone, and scapula are part of the appendicular skeleton. They're not part of the axial skeleton. That to me was very weird. So just make a note of that if that confused you too, okay? And then the other big takeaway from B.1.6, right, is that the bones are living tissue. Isn't this cool? We can change them over our lifetime, and that our bones are spiral, right? And they're designed to move and change, right? So surrounding the bones, like saran wrap, we have the periosteum. The periosteum connects to tendons, which connect to muscles. So tendons connect bones to muscles. And to regenerate that bone tissue, we put stress on the muscles, meaning we work the muscles. And that pulls the tendons and reminds the bones, like, hey, grow stronger, regenerate. So I think that's so cool, because I think a lot of times we think like our bones are just our bones and they don't change and they're just the way they are. And that couldn't be farther from the truth, right? We can strengthen our bones by doing weight-bearing exercises. And that your bones are going to change over your lifetime. So I think that's really fun. So don't stress about memorizing all the bones, but just do try to understand what's part of the axial skeleton, what's part of the appendicular skeleton. And then of course, if you want to memorize all of them, they're good. That's good too. So what questions, Jen, have come up that you think I should make sure to answer before you guys do jettas and introductions?
Lilith had one in the chat. She said, question on asymmetry and vinyasa. Can we spot someone's asymmetry? How can we help him or her in countering this asymmetry? Also, as a personal feeling in the vinyasa, I sometimes feel like one of my wrists and hands is not aligned with the other one when moving into vinyasa. When I look, it's actually aligned. Is this due to an asymmetry?
Okay, so maybe Lilith can unmute if she wants to talk a little bit more about what she means by asymmetry, because the body is asymmetrical. I mean, there's symmetry, but once we dig in, and you're going to see in the body reading and the fascial modules, it's very, very rare that, I mean, who here, we're going to talk about pigeon, and I think it's the next call, but pigeon on one side feels different from pigeon on the other side for most people, right? One shoulder usually has more range of motion than the other, right? So we all are dealing with asymmetry. A lot of people have one leg that's longer than the other, one foot that's significantly larger than the other. So this stuff, that's just normal, right? That's normal. If she's talking about asymmetry in the sense of like maybe severe scoliosis, things like that, We can talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the spine. Yeah, Lilith. Oh, you unmuted. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. It was maybe like, yeah, the length of the arms or something like this. Maybe also asymmetry in the muscle build, like we are stronger in one shoulder than the other, or something like this.
Yeah, so this is something that in a group class is going to be hard to do, but when you're working with your privates or in your own personal practice, so part of it's going to be understanding, is the asymmetry at the level of the skeleton, of the bones, right? I think we see that a lot with scoliosis, for example, right? That is going to be something that not your yoga practice alone is not going to be able to help with. Now we're going to talk about myofascial release and Rolfing and other ideas. But if you just know that, you know, this bicep is not as strong as this one, or one hip is tighter than the other in pigeon pose, you can start balancing those in your personal practice right away, right? I do that in my personal practice daily. That's the beauty of a personal practice. If you don't have a personal practice, join Uplifted so we can figure it out. Because if you have a personal practice, you can do pigeon on the left and stay longer if it feels tighter to you, right? So you can do it for 20 breaths or 2 minutes and do less time on the opposite side. You can hold side plank for longer on one side than the other side, right? When you're following along on a group class or a video, you're not really, you're teaching equal time on each side. But the minute you get into a private context or a personal context, I would really encourage you to do that. I mean, for me, when I stretch my quads, lying down on my back, I spend way more time on one side than the other side, depending on what's feeling tighter. And a lot of us have asymmetry from previous like athletic things we've done, right? Like if you play tennis, for example, you're going to have this arm's going to, well, whatever arm you serve with, right, is going to be way, way stronger. So that's something that you could balance out in your yoga practice, right? You could focus on trying to strengthen and build up the other side. Lilith, does that help answer your question a little bit? It's hard to address those imbalances in a group class context.
Yes, it helps, but also I'm a teacher and I give private lessons, so I was wondering if maybe we can spot imbalances in people and asymmetry.
Yes, so we'll talk about that in the body reading modules. Yeah, so you can, and coming up. Okay, cool. So if there weren't any other questions, we're going to split you guys, or Jen's going to split you guys into your Jutta groups. And if you were here on the live call on Wednesday, you already know what this is going to entail. But if you don't, I'm going to walk you through it. So you are going to do a really fun scavenger hunt that we've put together for you. So let me share my screen. And if you were live on Wednesday, you're welcome to stay and do this again and get more names on your sheet. I would totally encourage you to do that. If you need to go, if this isn't your regular call time, this is the moment where you can drop off if needed. But basically, you're going to set a timer on your phone for 3 minutes. This is to make sure that everyone has time to introduce themselves. They're going to say your name, where you're from, your favorite yoga pose. Don't overthink it. You're going to share a little bit more about yourself, right? Like, do you work full time? Are you a student? Are you a mom? Do you have pets? What kind of yoga are you practicing regularly? Did you start as a Bikram junkie like Brett, right? You know, whatever it is. And then you're going to share what you're most looking forward to in training and what you're most nervous about. And then your goal is to sort of fill out and try to gather names for this scavenger hunt sheet. So you can put my name, Brett L, for the first one. So you have one done already, and try to find and connect with some fellow folks. And Jen's going to arrange it so that you're in one group with a set of people, and then you're going to transition to being in a new group. And you really are, you're going to be working with each other throughout this whole training and practice teaching each other. You're going to be in relationship, so don't shy away. You want to take this time to get to know each other, because it's going to make everything that flows from this point so much smoother. Any other questions? So if you need to drop off, you're going to drop off. If Saturday is your regular call time, you're going to stay. And if you want to stay, please stay, because this is a great week when we're doing these introductions to sort of get to know folks and think about who are going to be your key buddies as you move through this training. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Jen. Thanks, you guys. It's been so fun. Namaste. And I'll see some of you on Monday.
Thanks, Brett.
All right, everybody. I'm going to open the breakout rooms. You will see an invitation pop up on your screen asking you to join. All you'll have to do is click on the join button. Let me pause my recording. All right. How did that go for everybody? Was that fun?
Amazing.
Awesome.
So much fun.
So glad you guys enjoyed that. That was Brett's idea, so we're going to have to let her know that that is a hit. Everybody put in the chat how many points you got.
Awful.
See some 6s, 5s. Everybody loved it. Awesome. I'm so glad. Were there any last questions that came up that you needed answered? Anything you might have forgot to ask during the call that, you know, Brett needs to address in the next one? You can unmute and ask or just put it in the chat. Nothing?
Hi.
Actually,
I had a question.
Awesome.
And it's just really if we're going to learn about this later or if this is kind of the time to ask about it. So I was wondering if we're learning more about which kind of poses are going to be more appropriate or inappropriate for certain proportions in people. But if that's coming later, then that's all I need to know for now.
Yes, sorry. I do remember seeing that in the chat now that you ask. Yes, we kind of touch on that as we go through each of the poses, like what's appropriate for some people, but it's kind of, I think Kristen touched on it in the video with like the proportions of the bones, like for example, you know, whether headstand's right for you, if your arm length is enough that you can, you know, things like that. So yeah, we do touch on that when we are reviewing all of the different poses themselves. Kate, go ahead.
Great. I know this is kind of like beginning housekeeping stuff, but as far as uploading like pictures of the asanas, can we do as many as we want for feedback, or are we limited to like the 3 we're good at, 3 we're uncomfortable with, and then our teacher ones?
I'm gonna say as long as it's not a ton.
Okay.
You know, I mean, if there's a pose that you really, really want feedback on, upload it, make a note. There's, you should be able to make notes in your asana pictures. There's like a function where you can like click on something somewhere and it'll allow you to make a note. So just like make a note for Brett, like I really wanted this one spoken to, and she'll do that.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And I had seen somebody else had unmuted and had a question. Was it Dee Dee?
Yeah, that's me, Dede. Hi,
Hi.
Jennifer. Hi. My question actually has to do with the call time. This call was supposed to be at 4 p.m. GMT, if I understood correctly, right?
It is, somebody else had an issue with the time zone converter thing. I'm really not sure, honestly, how that all works. I'm not good with time zones, to be completely honest with you. If this call time is not something that works for your like daily, you know, if this isn't going to work for you on a regular basis, email in, let me know, and we'll see about getting you put on a different day. But yeah, this is when this call time is, so.
Actually, I don't have a problem with that. It's just that I almost missed it. I just connected like an hour earlier and the call was already on. So had I come at 4 like I thought it was supposed to be, I would have completely missed it. So that's just
Yeah. Did
why
everybody get their email? There was supposed to be an email that came out like 15 minutes before to remind you. That happens the first 2 weeks. We get the emails 15 minutes before our call starts. So that's just something that kind of helps you get on, you know, get on that system where, you know, oh, my call's going to start soon. So, all right. Let me check the chat, make sure I didn't miss any last questions. Yes, Lilith, that book is excellent. I think I had posted it in the Facebook group, the Your Body, Your Yoga book. for learning what poses and things might not be appropriate. Catherine, you might like that one. All right.
Hi, I just have a quick question. Maybe it's a silly one, because when we say that we always get we get a new skeleton every 3 to 10 years, I guess, but the bones, it's just a cell that regenerates. It's not like the shape of the bone will change completely, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yes, you are correct. All right. Is that all of the questions we have for today? Yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve, guys, getting used to just when the call times are and everything. So try and look for those emails these first 2 weeks here, and we'll get used to the system and it will go smoothly from here. All right, we're at time, so thank you all so much for coming today, and I will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.